You're listening to Consulting Logistics, presented by FreightPlus. I'm your host, Kyle McNaught. Thanks for checking us out. Well, it's the holiday season. It's about to be, I think this is going to be our last podcast of the year. So really exciting. And I had to fulfill a promise that I made, which was to bring on Chelsea. Chelsea Howard, one of our account managers here at FreightPlus, coming on to do her part two, dose. I don't know why I want to say dose instead of just saying two, but part two of her Supply Chain Under 30, the series where we talk to supply chain professionals under or at the age of 30, because we wasted our time and didn't get this happening fast enough, where they just talk about their journey. And Chelsea's was a fabulous one, tons of reaction and stuff. And I mean, we ended at kind of one of the coolest transitions that you were about to make. But yeah, Chelsea, I mean, first off, thanks for joining me. It's finally cold up here in Mass. So
yeah,
as a Florida girl, how many layers are you wearing? Is it enough?
I think just 2 or 3, but I did spend about $200 on sweaters last week. So
are you ready for the shoes? That's the thing.
I have one pair of actual boots that I'm trying to figure out what else I can put with them. I guess I'm gonna have to get some more
socks. You got to get warm socks.
I have actual boots and one pair of warm socks or a stash of hospital socks that I'm just layering. I'm as long as you can't see the little grippies, it still counts.
Oh yeah. Marshalls or TJ Maxx is the key. Major. Yeah. A little insider, Massachusetts only type of thing. Yeah.
TJX isn't.
Yeah. We're Maxwell. Maxwell's. Maxinistas up here, but TJ Maxx is where I got a bunch of my winter stuff for kind of cheap.
So right, Marshalls with $200.
Marshalls, yeah, no duh. But get ready for that. So how you liking the cold? It's brutal, right?
It's already there, and I'm already I said, I was freezing.
And this is the nice time.
I know,
because it's actually enjoyable for a season. What'd you think? So Thanksgiving, we're recording this post Thanksgiving pre Christmas. What'd you think about actually celebrating a holiday in the actual season it's supposed to be in?
Yes, that makes it so much more enjoyable. And there's a holiday associated with it. It's really immersive.
Right.
And literally I think it was Friday night. It actually started snowing.
Yeah.
We went to dinner. We're walking back, and the rain that was kind of drizzling on the way there started going the other direction. Why is the rain going up? It's floating. Oh my gosh. And then it just kept getting heavier and heavier throughout the evening. I'm this is actual snow. It's our first snow up here. Not my first snow, but up here.
Yeah, but enjoy that, because I wish every snow was like that. It didn't stick. There was nothing. You got to oh, okay, cool. I walked my dog in the snow. I was all right, this is fine. It's as long as it's nothing bad, it doesn't stay, I'm good. And I was oh, it's coming.
Walking the dog, no, we're going to train you to use the toilet.
They love it. No, I wish. Sorry, that's a very fun tangent for sure, but let's get back into it, because when we last left you, coming back to that situation, was you were in Jacksonville. You're working for that company that you met in a mixer. You kind of continue to grow up in there, but you end up making a transition to a really, really kind of huge 3PL managed outs, or there are a bunch. You end up going to Transplace. So talk me through that. How did that happen? How did you end up finding I guess what would be one of the big names within transportation?
So yet another, I think, example of being not only be present, show up for everything you can, and just do your best at all times, because we had no idea this was an acquisition. Transplace was acquiring Houston's domestic division. So we were already pretty separate from the parent Houston company. And so it's part of the NYK group, pretty huge in Japan and stuff. So it was it ended up being a pretty easy transition as far as culture and stuff, because it was literally moving our intermodal team, and they didn't really have much of any intermodal. So they're basically bringing all of us on to their subsidiary Celtic that does intermodal. We just happen to be really complementary with our customers and stuff. But the how that actually came about is most people didn't even know we were for sale. I didn't know. There's rumors, but there's always rumors.
There's the sign out in front of the business.
Yeah, right. For sale.
There wasn't an open house.
For sale by owner. But yeah, so the Transplace was looking around. I guess the deal started happening, so rumors started getting more and more. And I didn't know till the day it happened. They're saying it was a decision that was okay. This is final, and also some people are
being let go. Yeah.
Some people are getting severance packages and some people are getting job offers.
Right.
So, it was half and half, but made the cut there, got a job offer to do something similar. Just for my role, I was leading a team at the time, and they're well, this is an acquisition. We have a ton of projects, and you do projects, and know this USIN group. I think that'd be perfect. To like, can you help us with all the projects of like, marrying the two organizations and bringing all that together? So kind of was, I'll say lucky, but worked really hard, but but also really fortunate for that kind of the role I was doing, the experience I had already had up to that point, busted my butt in that, and then was able to really take advantage of a project role.
Right, because you came into the first business. I don't know why I keep blanking on the name of it, but USIN. You came into USIN, big in Japan. You came into USIN kind of as a jack of all trades, more or less. Like it wasn't like you were specialized on a particular thing. You were there because like you went to a mixer and then you kind of just kept doing that stuff. So that's probably got to be a super nerve-wracking thing. It had to be like, oh geez, and like almost a little imposter syndrome, because you're just like, oh my gosh, what, like
they're like, oh, intermodal.
You're like,
I do projects, like I know people that know intermodal, but like I'm just gonna keep my head down and keep like whatever I have to go study, I will. But I just have my one class of transportation under my belt. Like, imposter syndrome, spot on.
Yeah, geez, that's got to be, especially, I mean, how aware were you of Transplace prior to kind of the acquisition?
I'd heard of Transplace, but really because they did a lot of over the road, which was maybe 10% of our business, 10 to 20 at USIN. So like just the trucking side. So I'd kind of heard of them a little bit just from, they're another broker or something, but not much. And it's even more confusing when we started, because technically we were kind of marrying up with Celtic, who was a previous acquisition of Transplace's, but had enough of its own customer base and brand recognition that they kept their own name. They didn't become part of Transplace. Right. So then like within the first couple of weeks, kind of this like identity crisis of like, okay, well, Transplace HR came in and gave us all, the welcome packets and their whole thing. But then this Celtic name keeps popping up. So we're like trying to get to know both of those. It was interesting. It was an experience.
What would you, now kind of looking back, hindsight, what would you do you have advice for, like, because merger and acquisitions are happening all the time right now in the industry, and especially if you're young, you kind of want to make a good impression. You want to like, hey man, like I get it. I have one of the lower salaries. So it's almost like, hey, if I have some sort of skill set that you're going to find, I'm probably going to, most likely be like, yeah, let's keep this on. Like it's energetic, it's bright young talent. I mean, what's some advice you would have for kind of managing that type of transition?
Yeah.
You do it all again. If you're talking to younger Chelsea, what would you tell her to, like, hey, be prepared for this type of stuff?
Honestly, that sounds boastful, but like I actually really, looking back now, I think I handled it very well. That just being present, doing the best you can. Since we had no idea that this was even happening, we didn't know. For fact, it's just scuttlebutt by the water cooler, right? But like just being present and working my butt off, that was my reputation. Like I'm always there. Well, probably not that early. Also on time, and then but stayed super late, working on weekends. Just I wanted to do really well and just put my best foot forward. I want to be proud of everything that I did, and that was my reputation. And very much, salary definitely would come into play. The new company coming in saying, okay, this person makes 6 figures. I'm sure we can, find somebody else a little bit cheaper than that to do the same work. But for the most part, I'd say like 3/4, if not more, of the people that stayed on, I think was based on reputation, that got a job offer, as opposed to like severance or whatever. Say like, you know what, we might not even have an equivalent job for you, but we want to keep you on. We're going to find you somewhere and say, can you do this or can you do this? Because so that reputation you build is completely necessary.
Yeah, being the best and brightest, it's something that's incredibly valuable. Your reputation matters as much as like, hey, you might not know the work, you might not know the project, but understanding like, hey, I need to be present, I need to be likable, I need to be. There was a study I was reading recently where it's like, you always want when it was surveyed, it's like, who do you want to join your team? You kind of want the person who really knows their stuff, but you want someone you actually like. Yeah. And like, if it came down to like, hey, you kind of know your stuff, but like, I don't like you, compared to you, like another person who like, hey, I like you, and you're at the same knowledge level. I want to work with the person I like. It's so important. It's one of those things that it's like weird to understand until you really get into the business world of like, oh wait, like it matters if I'm likable. Like not just because like I studied or I know all this stuff and I'm like bright and I've done all these things. Like there's interpersonal stuff with a job. It's so interesting. And
there's so much from a leadership perspective. Like I do a lot of research on the impact of soft costs. There are so many soft costs with not having the right team member on the team.
Right.
So if you're just, I mean, it's not even not likable, but if you're just kind of neutral, whatever, or you're not like a go-getter, you do exactly your job, that's the reputation. Like you're sufficient, right? As opposed to like the potential. There's definitely opportunities I was able to or given to like, you know what, go ahead, let's see what you do with this presentation, or let's see what you do with. I think a big part of me even getting my first supervisor role was my potential, because I only had so much I was straight out of college, only had so much to speak to experience wise, but they knew like, okay, this is your reputation, this is your personality, this is already what you've shown with what you have. So what are you going to do with the next thing we give you?
Right. And you probably had some mixer. You're like, oh, sure, I'll do that.
No, that was the only mixer. But
at first, I thought that was, you're like, yeah, so with Transplace, I was eting in the cafeteria, free food, and all of a sudden.
So the point is, eat wherever you go.
Yeah, no. Always accept a free meal. Yeah, that's a fact.
For college kids.
Yeah, fresh out of college kids. College kids, they actually feed you. Once you get out of college is when you have to actually figure out how the hell food works. Oh man, I worked for a production company. We had this show that did food, and like they knew that I was like basically useless. So like they give me the food after they go, here's a giant like Tupperware thing of food. Like go home.
I would hope so, because you make like 4 versions.
Oh, I had
right?
dinner and lunch for weeks. I was like, this is great.
That's great.
Yeah, roommates weren't happy about how fat packed the refrigerator would be, but I loved the damn thing.
I'll save you a scoop if you let me have this whole shelf.
So past transition with Transplace, what type of work were you doing? I mean, it's cool to see the data and stuff. So how was that? Like, how did that whole technology and kind of that work and project base, what were you doing at Transplace?
So it initially started with the project-based work of bringing the two companies together. So there's a lot of like all of our contracts, like a lot of like legal things, data, our CRM. That's one of my first projects. It took like a year to get our first customer relationship management system. But that was the first one we'd ever used. And they were trying to roll it out company-wide. And by that, I mean like from headquarters in Tokyo across all business lines. So like air, ocean, intermodal, like domestic and international, all kinds of stuff. Yeah, it was, we had very different needs. So it was a mess.
You were running the implementation of a CRM at Transplace? No,
at USIN.
At USIN, okay.
So then, so Transplace was actually using Salesforce, and so I actually really love. So bringing ours over, but it's 2 different systems.
Right.
So having to learn this new system and then bring that over, and luckily I had 2 like by far my strongest team members were still there. So I'm like, please let me have them to keep helping with my projects because they're awesome. And one I kind of made like the go-to on our CRM, so she was able to really learn that. Like the new one, obviously Salesforce, very user friendly too.
Right.
So brought that in and just merged all of the data, all the customers' contacts, all that stuff. Lots of projects like that where you're just, what do you have? What do we have? How do we make it match? And then also just data integrity to weed so much stuff out.
Jeez.
So that was, a lot of projects initially. And then, but then started getting into more like the sales side. I started reporting to one of their sales directors, trying to do like some sales analytics, setting up like customer profiles, trying to some degree marry like Celtic and Transplace, bring those closer together, capitalize on their resources. They being Transplace, is that they have a lot more resources that kind of a little bit siloed. I'm like, why aren't we taking advantage of this? Like,
right.
So,
because that'd be a fun kind of knowledge hub in a sense where you're just getting a lot of just knowledge on and like expertise on staff that you kind of can tap into. But how did you, especially kind of being not the outsider, but kind of the redheaded stepchild? How did you manage that? How'd you walk through that kind of tightrope of like, hey, I know you don't know me, but we were part of the acquisition and love to kind of pick your brain about this.
Yeah. Honestly, you just gave me a couple of flashbacks. I think I was pretty aggressive, especially getting to like process improvement, which I mean, you often have to be, especially when like the less experience you have. I think you just need to just go for it. So yeah, there was a couple times that they actually had a Lean Six Sigma department just for full Six Sigma projects and things like that. So they had like a Lean Six Sigma department that I really wanted to be a part of. I'm like, let me be the arm of that for Celtic because that's specific to Transplace. We have all kinds of opportunities, and it doesn't really. They have very different business like service lines, so it's really hard for them to adapt. And like they'll come and try to help, but there's such a gap there. Like we don't really understand your business, so here's some kind of vague recommendations on how you could approach this.
Real quick for the audiences, for me, I don't even know what I'm saying. That Lean Six Sigma. Can you kind of high level break that down? What exactly does that mean?
Yeah. So high level, it's process improvement. Right. So there's a bunch of technical terminology around that and a bunch of different methodologies. So I think Ford was one of the first ones. Just basically like the old fashioned like assembly lines. How can we make them more efficient? And then actual workers, like doing something physically or like on the computer now, obviously a lot more, less tangible, but extremely impactful. If you're doing 5 clicks instead of 1, or can we, build a macro that does it for you?
Right.
What can we automate? So things like that, we're taking out extra steps as much as possible. Waste is a big term used in all the different methodologies or Muda and Kaizen. Just any extra steps you have to take, extra thinking that you need to do, all those extra steps that just like are really just bogging you down throughout the day and like making you think less creatively.
Now, how did you end up finding out that you had a passion in that? Like, because that's something that like you think no brainer. Like, yeah, of course I'd like to be more efficient. And like, why was I doing this? Like maybe it's a generation thing too. Maybe I'm just out loud thinking with this. But how'd you end up finding that like, hey, this was something I found interesting, especially because you've just been this kind of curious person this entire time. How did you end up finding like, hey, wait a second, my curiosity keeps bringing me to this like little area?
I would say really early at Houston, actually, when I joined I started operations, kind of like operations support role, and got an opportunity over in sales support. And there was just so much that like I could tell, I didn't know it was even a thing yet, or that, process improvement and stuff like that, business process mapping, all of that even existed. But I would like go to work every day. There's only 2 other women on my team and they're just inundated with work all day, every day. And I'm trying to alleviate stuff, but I can only help so much. So just started trying to document out, okay, if I can get this off your plate, what exactly, obviously I don't know it as well as you do, what exactly needs to happen, when I go research this company or when I do this, what do you need to know for sure? So I know I can give you a complete, result or whatever. And then that started to lead to like actually documenting out a process. Like, okay, well, I found out like I can't do it the way you do it, but I can do it differently. And I can do it much faster. Like I can't even finish it this way, but I can do it, in half the time if I do it this way.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that. Like you kind of watch and you're like, oh, why are you doing it this way? And like but it's funny because I think the opposite, because I'm on the other side a lot of times where I'm like, hey, I do it this way because it's the way that makes sense in my head.
Yeah.
But I'm like, there's probably better ways to do it, and feel free to kind of engage. But it's funny, I find a lot of times, especially when I work with interns and stuff, not saying any interns, if you listened, and I'm not pointing you out in particular, but when I work with interns, a lot of times it's very much just like, no, you told me what the process is, I'm doing that. Like, what makes you different? I guess is my question. What makes you like recognize like, oh, I'm going to look at what you do, but I'm going to see if I can't do it better. Is it just a competitive spirit or what is it?
That's definitely a factor. I'm very competitive with myself, I would say, like usually not with other people. I know it's possible.
Right.
So I just strive to achieve that, which usually just keeps extending the horizon. But there was a lot of times, maybe I think it's I'd say a lot of times, but sometimes it's the actual challenge of I'm not good at this, but that competitive spirit, like I know I'm capable.
Right.
So let me just find another way around it. Like I don't have to do it this way. And very often very often in process improvement in general, there's so much gray area and just assumptions. Most people don't know why they're doing something. Most people don't know they're doing it, period. If you really get into process improvement, I mean, there's so much, like if you think about like brushing your teeth in the morning, which tooth did you start on? Usually you don't know, right? Like you just started or like about.
I switched my quadrants. I got the whole vibrating one, buzzy. Yeah.
But like, that's one of the examples they use of like, or like, what was the first thing you did this morning? There's so many things that are just muscle memory, especially if you do them every single day. You don't notice it.
Right.
So like it just starting to, especially I think it really helped for me to not understand a lot of what was going on. Didn't understand the business, the industry in general is very new. So me asking all those probing questions, a lot of people didn't know.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, especially just to know, like you've said multiple times, this wasn't your passion. This wasn't something you were going for. So it's It's interesting because I think in the logistics world, or at least what I hear a lot of times coming back to me, is that it is that I didn't know about logistics. I didn't know about supply chain. Hell, I didn't really care about any of that stuff. I was doing this and I just kind of stumbled upon it, which is
you trip into it.
You trip into it, but it's interesting too of that the next step, which is like, okay, jump in. Like, hey, if you didn't know about it, you kind of picked up the job because it was COVID and I needed a job and it seemed like supply chain was hiring and stuff like that. I mean, the next step is that process improvement and stuff. So it sounds like it was an awesome opportunity because you're kind of looking at that and all of a sudden, like, they put a name to it with Lean Six Sigma at Transplace. And you're like, oh, wait a second. What is this?
That's what I've been researching like crazy. And I know there's a company that actually does that.
Right.
I thought you had to, like in my experience, you have to convince your company that this is actually, that's why I got really good at ROIs because I had to convince them at all times, like especially soft costs, because they're like, this whole department, we can't even like validate what you do. Yes, you can actually. Hold on. Like a person and every hour of their time is money and overhead. And like, hold on, I'm going to put this down. If I'd spend an extra 5 minutes, that costs you $200. Like, let's put it in something you can, kind of grasp a little bit. You being like leadership, actually have some respect for like, okay, I can definitely talk dollars. But then like, so anyways, as you like start to make those improvements, there's so much positive reinforcement that comes out of that. And like, okay, well now like my team members are feeling drastically better because this is only taking like the first hour of their day instead of half their day. And they feel so much better and more confident and they do something else. And like the energy is just way better. And like, let's find something else. And what could we be doing instead that's even more valuable than this crap, So
you get the Lean Six Sigma and then you what happens next? Kind of what are you doing at Transplace? Because I mean, logistics, we see it a lot. There's a lot of unnecessary process, a lot of automation, a lot of things that could be happening, but it's just one of those, hey, I've been stuck in my thing. Is that kind of, you're like, you got this process, you got this passion with making things more efficient. You start to realize like, well, wait a second. It's not just intermodal. Like that was one of the easier modes. Like there's a bunch of fun stuff out there that like you probably can be doing this a lot better.
It's literally anything. And again, talk about rewarding. It's going to the experts. Like I don't want to be the expert. You tell me, what are we trying to accomplish? Let's make sure we both know that. That's well, saying is very often just not even acknowledged. I mean, like consciously or not. You're just like, okay, someone told me to do something like the interns, like, okay, I'll go do this. I want to make a good impression. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? And then from there, okay, well, you tell me, like, what are your headaches? If I just focus on making your job easier, we're going to find a way better way to do this. Like, what bugs you? It's probably what's annoying in your job? It's probably because it's not very efficient.
Right.
So let me just find a way to cut that out. So Transplace, a lot of that research finally like culminated into a company that really was centered around that. I would say, so technically me being over in Salt Lake, not as much exposure to that. So that's why I was being so aggressive to get onto their lean team. But doing a lot of projects of not only like the CRM and stuff like that, then marrying those two subsidiaries for Transplace. And then, I mean, Transplace acquired like crazy, obviously until last year, acquired like crazy. It was at least one acquisition a year. So there was a lot of more kind of projects of just
new opportunities, new processes, new understanding, and that. Okay.
And then COVID hit, and that was a whole nother level of, we had to like downsize a little bit, but then we got a huge bid, won a huge bid, and then had to get right back up. Like, okay, we need all these team members back because we got this huge bid and we can't cover that now. We weren't expecting that with COVID and, shipping retail and stuff. All the stores are closed. And so like got really into HR kind of realm, like not actual HR, but a lot of training, documenting all the processes because we need to hire like crazy now. Most people on the team they know what they're doing, right? Or they have a sticky note on their desk, tells them the codes to stuff or whatever. Well, how are we supposed to train somebody, especially virtually? So completely, unprecedented times, but uncharted territory of hiring people remotely, trying to coordinate like contactless equipment acquisition and like how do we give them their equipment? How do we like over the phone? They're in Chicago or something. I'm like in Florida saying, okay, is there a red cord that doesn't match my equipment? So I'm just guessing or Googling it, right? I'm not IT, like nor am I HR, but okay, let's figure this out and then let's train you, with just Teams, FaceTiming kind of thing. And,
right. You're dealing probably to make assumptions or kind of thinking out loud of if I was in your position, it probably was a little frustrating because your process improvement up to COVID seemed to be like you got to get more complex. You got to get your hands on some fun things that you were really looking at. Now you kind of big step back. You're like, okay, let's figure out how we can help you get an email signature when I can't click on your computer for you to make this happen. Like
I learned quickly how to just remote in because I'm not going to keep explaining this to people. God bless them. I'm just gonna.
Oh yeah. So I mean, let's start talking about the transition because it seems like it to me like you made a huge jump, right? So that's another thing I'll talk about. It's like transitioning from one state to another, and it's not like it's like going over the border to Georgia from Jacksonville. Right. You went to Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Kind of what drove you to kind of want to make that transition? What were you feeling kind of at the nearing your end time of Transplace that kind of was like, oh man, I'm ready to kind of make the next step? What was the signal for you to like, I'm ready to move on or do something different?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're not putting words in my mouth at all. That's pretty dang spot on. So, and I thought, okay, well, there's a major, factor of the pandemic, right? We're all working from home. That makes you feel completely detached. But I mean, my supervisors for the last several years were always in Chicago with me in Jacksonville. So I'm used to also being quite virtual with them. I no longer had I was no longer no longer leading a team. So going back to like individual contributor, which I kind of liked initially because, like, okay, well, I've been leading for a while. I want to get back to where I'm, small
doing
fish,
work.
big pond. I want to learn, keep getting on this learning trajectory again. So obviously there's never, not anything else to learn. Right. So
right.
There's always going to be something else. So, but yeah, I that got old pretty quickly. I really like to lead. I like to make big changes. I like to make lives easier. And I get so frustrated. It's a problem. I get so frustrated with like, oh, let's just do it. Let's find a way to make your life easier. You shouldn't have to deal with that headache every day or, anybody. But I got less and less opportunities for that being, again, pandemic from home and just in general, it's just like, nobody really knew what to do with those times. And
right. You're losing the group think in that sense.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, we can train 2 people and that knowledge spreads to 2 more, which is then 4 people. And they keep doing that stuff when you're remote. Mm-hmm. So they always time a 1-to-1. Yeah. And like, you're like, all right, I hope that maybe this next person will help. They run into the same situation, but that's going to be super frustrating.
Yeah. And the turnover was with the new hire thing. Like it's stressful to do. Which was stress. It just was a cloud that was infectious, I think, because you get all of these new folks that have never been in the transportation industry doing operations. To this day, I think is one of the hardest jobs in transportation, if not the hardest job, because there's just so much back and forth, so much you just have to know, and you only kind of learn it just being on the job. So doing that remotely, you're not in the middle of, it's basically like the stock floor, right? You're just like, everyone's yelling over each other and like, but you're immersed in it and you can learn a little bit easier, I think, in comparison to being remote, having to call somebody who's already, overworked or understaffed in each area. So they don't even have time to do their job and teach you. So you're kind of on your own. There's just so much stress that then just made us less and less, in my opinion, less and less productive and efficient and kind of long-term thinking. So there would be times where I say, you know what, it'd be much better. I think if we kind of gave this dedicated time, here's the way I think we can be more impactful on their first week or 2 so that they end up, much more confident. They can stay longer. We won't have as much turnover. But then they're like, oh, we don't have time for that. It's just, bane of my existence. We don't have time to get faster. So, so that was really frustrating, but I also had some like medical stuff going on. So I'm just trying to take it easy, wait for the pandemic to alleviate a little bit and then my medical stuff to pass. And after a while, it's like, no, I'm miserable. Like, this isn't exciting. This isn't, like you said before, the trajectory that I was on was so inspiring and motivating all the time. Of course, there are frustrating days, but it still was like, I can't wait to get over this next hurdle, and find the next one. Started just kind of dialoguing that with, my network in general. I was on some CSCMP calls and just happened to mention, I was even saying, hey, do you guys know any jobs? I was just kind of talking about, are you guys getting frustrated with work? Is this a pandemic thing or is this my company or just, my role and what my position was? So a good friend of mine happened to say, hey, I know someone who's looking for a job or looking to recruit, and I know that you're not so happy where you are. Can I introduce you? Well, of course. And then honestly, just got immensely more the more I talked to FreightPlus, got more and more just captivated by the people, by the culture, seen a couple of different cultures, and there's always like a claimed culture versus the actual culture.
Yeah, I mean, I completely get that the culture, and like you're saying, it's got to be frustrating when you're kind of dealing with the one-on-one at home and stuff. And I mean, especially kind of looking back now, you see sort of, hey, retention's a hard thing in COVID. Like it probably like it wasn't just you, right?
Yeah.
It was that kind of everywhere and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all a bunch of factors. I mean, it's awesome, right? You're frustrated and stuff. Is that kind of what motivated you to take the big jump? I mean, it is multiple states you're leaving. I mean, a lot of your family connections, your ties are all in Florida. We're in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
How do you brave that change? I mean, that's something that's a little unique from what we normally talk to. It's a lot of like, hey, I kind of got something where maybe my wife was from or something like this. I mean, you are truly an outsider in a state that is miserable for outsiders. Speaking as a fellow outsider.
Floridians.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, they're horrible, the Floridians up here. But talk to me. I mean, I was at a friend's house the other night, and like one of the people there was like, Florida's the worst. How could you possibly want to be there? I'm like, where have you been in Florida? She's like, Disney World. I'm like, so you haven't even been to Florida? I'm like, you've been to Disney, which isn't Florida.
Park. Of course, that's miserable.
Yeah, we're like, I'm like, that's not even Floridians there. I'm like, go to Orlando. I'm like, Orlando. Yeah, I'm like, it's Brazilians and British people there. I'm like, what the hell are you mad at? British people is what you're pissed at, not Floridians. And then they're like, whoa, this news. I'm like, the news is the same up here. I'm like, the stories are just as insane. It's just there's a difference, like of why they talk about the stuff. But it's a long Florida man rant, which I could probably do a 45 on that.
Yeah, we should do like 5 sessions of that.
Yeah, just Florida man. That'd be a 12-part series of just like, first of all, you don't talk about is keep our name out your mouth if you. But I mean, what was the thing? How did you
inspired that leap?
Yeah, what inspired it?
So, I mean, you're spot on. Like, even just leaving my company, like, technically, I was still the same group of people, or, a core group of that people that I've been with at USIN and transitioned over to Celtic and Transplace. Of course, they kept evolving, and, some people fall off, some people join, but still very comfortable, should I say?
Right.
I mean, lots of different challenges and stuff, but it's comfortable, right? It's secure. And also had great health insurance, so I was really scared to leave that. So it was scary in general to even like go out and job hunt. And I found multiple times that I was getting, looking back now, I want to shake myself, but there's so many times where I was so exhausted by the end of the day. I didn't do any job hunting. I didn't go update my LinkedIn or anything or network and stuff.
Right.
I was just so exhausted from trying and getting no buy-in and like trying to make things better and just getting no buy-in really. And just like, you know what? Okay, so I just need to just do what I'm told. That's so defeating for me. Like, well, why though? Like, my life is more difficult because of it. I know the people I'm working with, their life is more difficult, and I could improve both of our situation, but I can't get that buy-in. I've tried everything, tried multiple ways. That's just really not good for you, having to convince yourself to get motivated again every day. And you're just kind of, depleting yourself all the while. So there was a lot of that, but I'd get so drained by the end of the day that I didn't even do anything, like I said, to like really reach out or anything. So clearly I was already nervous enough,
right,
and not motivated enough to actually like take the leap to another company locally even.
Right.
But finally just starting to talk a little bit with CSCMP, with my network, and just getting that first introduction to Jill actually here, the president at FreightPlus. It was just immediately like I want to say almost a wake-up call. There was just such a juxtaposition between the environment, culture, energy that I was in and just that first call with her. So I started looking up we have a huge YouTube channel. I geek on YouTube, so I was already a fan. I also geek on whiteboards, and we have a whole section on that. So I was like, okay, these people use whiteboards.
I could use you to start doing some because I need people to start filming them for me. So you're up.
But yeah, like it could even have like my desk had to be close to a whiteboard at most places because I'm like, I can't think until I can just brain dump somewhere. So that was already just so many things just started connecting, just mentally too. You just kind of like know, right? There was just such a good fit. Like I knew this was wrong. I knew it. I was unhappy all the time, unmotivated, and the majority of your life is work. So I mean, hours every day and everything. And I always felt like guilty to take time off and stuff. Like that's not healthy.
Right.
So let me just see what's going on with this company. So, talk to Jill, and then she refers me to Steve. And so started talking to folks in the company. And then they're like, you know what, you should talk to Jess. Go talk to my boss now.
Yeah.
So anyway, just every single one of them, there was just so much I just aligned with that I was just, yes. I like, they're going to think I'm faking like this connection or whatever. Like, I'm just being, kiss butt. But
Yeah.
like I'm just, brown nosing or something. But I just agreed with so much, and everything just like synced so well that I'm like, of course it's not going to be perfection. There's going to be, like the honeymoon period and everything, but still 90% of every interaction I was having was just spot on. I was like, you know what? I know it snows up there, but this is, maybe I started to entertain it a little bit as like, okay, well, I'm not going to leave Florida for Massachusetts. So like, maybe I can get something virtual, but if I really want to do projects, and well, most everything that I'm good at involves teamwork and, and working as a team, which is very difficult to do remotely, especially several states away. So, so I started to think, okay, well, at least like, maybe I could see if I can do like the first 6 months, at least, like I'll go there so I can at least know my team, get that rapport. So it's a lot easier and more productive day to day when I'm back home. And then I was just ready to make the move. Like within like a week or two, I'm like, you know what? Well, I'm not just going to move for 6 months, like that far away. That's an insane move. So Let me just do a year. And then as I started getting ready, and then as I started meeting my team, and then once I actually got up here, it's like, okay, 2, 3. I know I haven't been through winter yet, but there's no end in sight now. Like just everything there's such positive reinforcement.
You're begging for a part 3 so we could just see what happened. You're like back here in April. You're like, what the hell was that? Like, this season's horrible.
Yeah, you're not going to get me at all like during winter. I'm just going to stare out the window.
You just come in with a giant jacket. You just don't move. You're like, everything's cold and it hurts.
Oh, it's a full Michelin man. Like, I can't even like bend my arms. Like, this is already like 2 sizes too big, and so that I can fit more sweaters underneath it.
Yeah, the Christmas story is going to make sense to you soon. Of like, why did he not be able to move his arms? Yeah, no, I totally get that. The frustration, especially because, I mean, like you've talked about, your reputation was one of the things that really helped you kind of continue your career. And I could see where you're frustrated. You're like, well, man, I want to do good work, but I'm just frustrated with what I'm doing. So like, how do I be a harder worker? How do I kind of stay out? How do I do all this stuff? And I'm just like, I'm trying to figure it all out. And it's interesting. I mean, we've talked to like your good friend, Victoria Brown, who's at SCU30, who's supposed to be a part 2, who's supposed to be the first ever part 2, but she wouldn't get back to me. So I got to
shout out to Victoria.
I got to yell at her. But I mean, she's moved around a lot, right? Especially if you listen, like she's kind of gone, and she always kind of recognized the time to move, which is like, hey, I'm not learning. You're at flip side, but I still think it's valuable, especially to hear. It's like, no, you can get frustrated. And like, it's important to recognize that like, you try to exhaust all this stuff. The grass isn't always greener, but sometimes you got to recognize for yourself. I mean, work is such a huge, important part of your life that if you're not happy and you're trying to build your reputation and stuff, it's important to just not get stuck in I just can check my box and this is all I'm doing. Like, no, try to work, which is important.
If I could say on that too, like advice I'd give to myself is, now that we're talking through this, is chase culture. Because like I know the Victoria type, and she's phenomenal at like, okay, what she keeps her trajectory. She's awesome about that and saying, okay, where can I grow next? Right. And I'm terrible about that because I'm such maybe it's the competing with myself thing, where I'll know something's not that important in front of me, but if it can be better, I can perfect it. I'm going to just cling to it until it's perfect, regardless of if I should be going elsewhere. So I think there's so many times that I would just not go for something that I definitely should. I know I'm not prioritizing things like Victoria would, and I would just want to like push myself out. Like, what are you doing? Just go for it. But then that culture was the major change. Yet maybe I'll look at the job description. I don't know if I'd be happy with that. I don't know if I'd be happy with this one. And you just keep, regressing. Right. But like finding a culture that fits, doesn't matter what the job is, because you're going to be happier doing it. You're going to do a better job because of that, which is going to be positively reinforced. And then that'll lead to opportunities to something that's even better fit for you. At least you're happy day to day, motivated day to day, and then just climbing from there.
I love it. Let's try to start to quickly wrap up because you've already got so much on your plate and I've already taken up way too much of your time. Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit it with a really great piece of advice. I guess, is there anything else you'd want to talk to, especially you talking to the young up and coming supply chain professionals? What else would you want to make them aware of?
I'm gonna try to not beat a dead horse, but there's so much of your reputation is everything. Like you were saying earlier that people hire people they want to work with, right? So you and same for you, like you're following companies where, if your boss is moving to another company and you love your boss, you're probably going to say, hey, are there any openings for me to come along with you? So there's a lot, I think, where just making sure you have that strong reputation, that you are willing, that you are a go-getter, doing the best you can. Having that good reputation is way more valuable than having, a resume 5 pages long of everything that I've been exposed to. Okay, that's great. You went to, a week of this and a week of that. But that's different than what I can see you doing and what I know I can count on you for. Mm-hmm. So knowing what I can count on you for is huge. I think that'd be one of the biggest. And just be present, be there, be available. And then an epiphany I just had, follow culture.
Right.
Find the culture that fits.
I love it. What's the future hold for you? Especially knowing you're not one of those like, oh, I'm stepping here and stuff. How do you think what are you going to focus on kind of going forward?
And that was actually one of my first interview questions. Jess asked me, where do you see yourself in 10 years? And honestly, after this experience I've had so far, honest answer was, I don't want to recognize 10 years from now because of, every couple of years, my career path has already done just such big shifts or decent enough shifts. And I love that. It's always led me to a whole nother level, moving vertically across the country. Never thought I would do. So I really 10 years from now, I don't even want to recognize, because I didn't know process improvement existed. So I'm excited to see what's out there. But next couple of years, I want to do, I'm gonna geek out over BPM. I want to do process improvement and have this whole company. This company is booming. So I am really excited to be on the ground floor, this rocket ship. There's so many exciting opportunities to come. So
now you got your holiday bonus. Congrats. Way to go. Chelsea, thanks so much for joining me for part 2. I appreciate it. I already have my head turning about doing process improvement whiteboard series. So get psyched. You're doing more video. If people want to get in touch with you, other than going to the FreightPlus YouTube channel, where you're going to be featured heavily now that I've got someone to do whiteboard videos for myself, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, LinkedIn is a pretty easy way to do that. I'll be honest, that's probably the primary way. And I think it's just LinkedIn. Yeah,
LinkedIn's mainly the place where we always drive people. So I'll throw that in the show notes. But yeah,
it's probably the only place.
Yeah, no, same with me. Chels, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
All right, bye. And that's our show. Are you a supply chain professional under the age of 30 interested in talking about your journey? Let me know in the comments section, and I'll be sure to have you on the show. In the meantime, subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching Consulting Logistics. I'm Comic Knot. Rock and roll.